Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for August 8th. And just before I get into the news, just a quick funny aside. I notice almost every time I do a mispronunciation in a video, somebody will comment on it. And it's usually a younger than me person. And there's probably a reason for that, and we'll get to that in a second. But I always get a kick out of it because sometimes there's times where I do genuinely screw up, like Fresnel lens. Had no clue how that was pronounced. There's other times where I'll intentionally mispronounce a word. Or, like in this case, there'll be a word like melee that I mispronounced for so long. I know how it's pronounced. It's melee. I played EverQuest. I played World of Warcraft. You use Vent in those games for raiding. You know what melee is, right? But you got to take into account the 15 years where there was no internet when I was playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, role-playing games on a computer without the internet. You didn't know half the pronunciations for things. So you and your buddies guessed, right? You took the best. Perfect example of that is Dungeons & Dragons, right? For anybody who knows this game, you know that this is a treasured book, right? This is the original artwork monster manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Filled with monsters with all kinds of weird exotic names. Guaranteed we butchered 50% because, well, once the internet was a thing, we began to hear what the proper pronunciations were. And whether it's Bahamut or Behemoth, the Platinum Dragon, the list is long. So I got a chuckle out of that, thought it was funny. Let's get into the news and keep those coming because they can be comical. OSVR co-founder Yuval, he's one of the co-founders for the OSVR unit, was asked about his thoughts, his opinions on open source and the future of open source within virtual reality. He brought up some really cool, interesting points. And you can look at the discussion from two viewpoints. You can look at it from the consumer viewpoint. You can look at it from the dev studio viewpoint. The consumer side of things, what's the advantage? Cost. You're getting an open source unit. They're generally cheaper. But, and this is why I was so excited last week about the tracking being opened up for HTC Vive, that devs with the OSVR can start using that. So as a consumer, all kinds of possibilities open up for you with regards to what you can use that HMD for, right? That is awesome from a consumer point of view. From the development point of view, you've got open sourced libraries of example code, drivers. Let's pretend you're a steering wheel peripheral maker and you want to make the best VR racing wheel, right? For cockpit racing games. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can modify an existing wheel's driver foundation for yourself. Sometimes, depending on how bad the program is programmed, that may not be the best course of action, but particularly in cases where they've maybe used optimizations you weren't aware of, you can benefit from those. This cuts down development cycle time, allows the dev team to stay on budget, and add new candy, whether it's additional art assets, whatever. So there are all kinds of advantages. There's some disadvantages too, but there's all kinds of advantages for having open source. Yeah, it was a neat article, and it really kind of got into what those advantages were. I will have that in the description below, the link for that. The next article deals with an accessory by the creators, Inverse Studios, of The Nest. And that's an early access game for the Vive. They've created what they call the VR15. And they worked with a company that actually is called VArsenal, as in arsenal of weapons, VRSENAL, to create a cardboard rifle. There is no way I thought it was cardboard at first glance. You'll see the video, but it's cardboard. And it really opens up the possibility for what you can do with this thing, right? So they've made it so that you can add the Vive controller along the top. So you take advantage of the tracking, right? So imagine this is OSVR, for example. You can take advantage of that tracking. You can also charge it while it's plugged in because they include a battery pack. So they're a little sketchy on details when it will be launched, the platform of how it will be launched, but very, very cool. And just another example of innovation. It's literally the Google Cardboard equivalent, but on the peripheral side of things. So yeah, it's tempting. That is, however they sell that would be a tempting buy because the thing looks impressive. Like, have a look. It will be in a link below. The next one, also a gun, must have been a gun-themed evening. I don't know. But anyways, the next gun is from a company called Striker VR, and they call it the Arena Infinity. It's a haptic VR gun. The thing looks cool. It has a more outlandish sci-fi look as opposed to the more realistic look of the rifle I just talked about. But that's not to say it doesn't look good. It looks really good. The genius of this device is that haptic touch feedback that it offers. Everything from mimicking a chainsaw, right, to the feeling of recoil for, like, maybe something like a pump action shotgun, right? And I'm no gun expert, so I could have that analogy completely off. The point is, it has a wide array of feedback that it can offer. And I've always maintained that the Vive controller, what makes it so special is the almost universal standard grip that you use. It can easily be made to feel like anything from a sword to a pistol, right? Or a laser gun or a walkie-talkie, whatever. It's just a really good all-purpose universal design in terms of how it feels. So when you're in game and it's superimposed with some kind of in-game asset graphic, it doesn't ruin the immersion. It enhances it. So really cool. Again, that's from a company called Striker VR, and it's the Arena Infinity Haptic VR gun. Now, I joke from time to time about Gabe Newell. Gabe Newell is the guy that I love to say swims in a pool of gold bars. Where do you find Gabe? He's in his pool doing the backstroke through all those bars of gold. Basically, anything the guy touches turns to gold, right? He has just had this incredible run of luck in an industry that never really had incredible runs of luck as a precedence. And he just kind of made things happen, right? And I've talked about the old, he converted us into digital content subscribers without us asking for it. Until one morning we woke up and realized, holy shit, everything's on Steam. I don't have physical copies. When did that happen, right? It's been genius from Valve. And it's also the basis of my good cop, bad cop, Valve versus HTC for their Vive, right? But Gabe Newell, now I'll backtrack a bit. What's interesting about Valve is they have a very open policy of work. There's not a lot of hierarchical structure, right? So very loosey-goosey in terms of who you report to. Everybody kind of is on the same level. That's the intent. I honestly don't know how well that works in practice. I've never worked in that kind of environment. But that's what you always hear from Valve. So it was neat to hear him say, specifically, because you can choose what you want to do as a Valve employee a lot of the time. He chose to spend most of his time, mostly every waking minute, as he puts it, with the virtual reality team. Now that, to me, is awesome. And here's why it's awesome. Gabe Newell, and it's that same quality that I talked about, right? Where you suddenly wake up and you've been assaulted, but you're kind of, in a weird way, okay with it. Not the assault, but kind of the end result. And it's just this weird thing that makes Valve so successful, right? So for him to be involved and offering input, I think can only be a good thing. So the reason, and there's a reason I feel that, is because think about what content they've come out with. Now, that granted, they are notoriously slow with releasing stuff, right? Half-Life 3, anyone? But with that said, they are, they had, the Lab, and they had Portal VR, nothing else. You could also look at that and say, that must mean that they've been tied up doing AAA VR stuff. And I think that's exactly what's going on. I would not be surprised if either just ahead of this holiday season or timed to coincide with this upcoming holiday season, that Valve pulls a rabbit out of a hat. I'm not saying it's going to be the killer app we're all waiting for, but it's probably going to be a very intriguing AAA title. At least that's my hope. That's my hunch. We'll see where that goes. You can call me on it in November or December if it doesn't transpire, right? The last item deals with a very strange video, a WTF facepalm what the hell video. The video is called Welcome. It's not a video, it's a virtual reality experience played out like a music video with some weird stuff going on, right? Now, one of the things I mentioned on this channel before is I don't really get into politics or religion, right? Really, because when you're dealing with the internet and EPs and egos and personalities and this versus that, there's really no clear winners. Not that I don't like good, honest debate. I do, but I'll go to the proper venues to have those discussions, right? Well, the third factor is, one of drugs. Drugs is not something that you generally will talk about, right? And for good reason. As soon as I saw this game, however, instantly I thought, wow, Psychonaut. And again, this isn't a pro-drug or anti-drug or any of that. It's just telling it like it is. This game looks like it caters to the psychonauts of the world, i.e. those people who enjoy psychedelics, psilocybin, LSD, whatever. As soon as you see that, that's the first thing, anyways, that came to my mind, because not on the influence of any of those things, it's way too wacky. Very strange stuff, but have a look. It's kind of catchy, but very, very strange and very purpose-minded. That's my hunch anyways. The link will be in the description below. Have a look and let me know if you think likewise, right? The next article deals with VR being huge in China. Well, thanks, Captain Obvious. We weren't aware of that. But there's so much more that goes into the discussion, right, than just a large population. Culture plays a role. The socioeconomic status of a country's inhabitants plays a role, right? The article dealt mainly with VR growth in China and why it's going to be such an important thing for virtual reality. And we've touched on China before, but we're going to dig a little deeper just into another angle. And the angle is how they propose to sell VR to the masses. And this is so uniquely China. Well, let's delve into it. The very first thing is China overwhelmingly is still a majority PC gamer country. For all kinds of reasons, some of them are embargoes against, console manufacturers, or they chose not to. There's all kinds of reasons for it. But the reality is a lot of them are PC gamers. So right there, you've got an appealing market segment for your PC-based virtual reality unit, right? The other aspect of it is in China, you've got a culture that is still very accepting of arcades because, again, of socioeconomics. It sometimes makes more sense, or a lot of times it makes more sense to go to an internet cafe or a VR cafe, right? Couple that with, right now, if China rolls this stuff into arcades, and that's what they plan on doing, you're almost guaranteed an audience, right? The games and the experience still has to be good, but it's an amazing way to market something. So they've got that going for them too with the arcades. You've got the fact that they're mostly PC-centric to begin with, right? But the other side of that, and look at HTC Vive. Oculus Rift is almost non-existent in China, whereas HTC have a base of operations there. So for them, it makes all kind of sense, right? And you've got stuff like censorship. Look at Australia. Okay, Australia is a perfect example where you could look at it and say, okay, they've got a certain market size, right? And it wouldn't be apples to apples because it was only until January 1st, 2013, I believe, that they actually acknowledged that, oh my God, adults play video games? Yes, adults play video games. But the law was created obviously by Australian lawmakers who didn't play video games. So they had a rating system up until 2013, right? January 1st, that basically censored adult content and you weren't able to buy it. So as an adult, and I don't remember if this game was one that was targeted, but let's just use it as an example. When Doom 3 came out, there was a lot of hype for the game. In Australia, I wouldn't have been able to purchase the game because there was no rating for that type, right? It basically kind of stopped at PG, parental guidance, or mature gamer maybe, but not beyond that. So they finally revised that, and now, yes, you can start to make those apples to apples comparison, Australia against another country of similar size, right? But there's way more factors. We touched on some of those, culture, etc. China has a lot of checks. If you're making a checklist for you want this, 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 and this, China checks off a lot of those boxes, right? We've talked about some of them, the arcade rollout, PC-centric to begin with, numbers, growing middle class, all kinds of possibilities in China. So it's worth talking about from time to time and keeping an eye on. We want to see where China goes with HMDs, right? It's nice to have 20 to 30 in the marketplace, but how many are really going to be successful? How's that going to look a year from now? 2, 3, 4. That's the part that's going to be interesting to me anyways. All right, guys, as always, cheers, and we will see you on the flip side.